This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
You're listening to Saucepans and Sidesteps.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Saucepans and Sidesteps podcast. Joining me, Big M, is the MS for Mid and West Wales, Cefin Campbell. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Well, da iawn, yeah. Well, I say da iawn very well, but after the weekend we've had on the rugby field, I suppose we're all still licking our wounds a little bit and trying to understand what the heck happened on Saturday.
I don't think anyone's going to be able to understand exactly what happened or what went wrong. But, obviously problems afoot, and hopefully you might be able to help out on some of this. So for myself and our listeners, can you give us a little bit of info about yourself? Who are you? What's your background?
Yeah, right. Okay. So as you said, I'm Cefin Campbell. So I represent Mid and West Wales, which is a huge part of Wales. Is about probably 80% of the geographical area. So there's a lot of travelling, a lot of meeting people in different parts. But I'm a Carmarthenshire boy, born and bred, brought up in Glanaman in the Amman Valley, Shane Williams country. And I live now in just outside of Llandeilo. So a season ticket holder with the Scarlets. So a huge rugby supporter, also, follow the Swans as well in football. So obviously very interested in sport and care deeply about the malaise of rugby in Wales, which has been going on for many, many years. But it kind of came to a head on Saturday when we saw the gulf in the talent that was on the field between the two sides. But so I came into politics fairly late. I was a lecturer at both Swansea and Cardiff universities. Then I went to run a community development company known as the Mentra Iaith, which is promoting the Welsh language and community development in Carmarthenshire. Then I ran my own business for a while, mainly in the field of education, and decided to become a county councillor, cabinet member of Carmarthenshire County Council, and now a member of the Senedd with responsibility for education. So in terms of being an opposition spokesperson. So that is it in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So you're a very well-travelled person then in terms of education especially. So if we just try and set the playing field. So we see in many sports that there is involvement, from the Senedd, whether that's direct or through Sport Wales. So, how does the Senedd currently support rugby and what's the relationship with the WRU?
Listen, we know how important rugby is to Wales as a nation, right? Most, or many countries in the world know of Wales through rugby. They wouldn't have heard of Wales if it wasn't for rugby. But to be fair, our football players have done, us really proud in the last 10, 15 years, get to the quarterfinals or semi-finals rather of the Euros and, qualifying for the World Cup as well and doing really, really well. So, we've punched above our weight in terms of sport. And, we should be supporting sport far more than we do. Unfortunately, we've seen cuts to grassroots sport through Welsh Government support in recent years. A lack of support for culture and the arts as well. So it's all suffered because of a lack of funding and a lack of investment. But I'm not saying, that's the real reason why sport has been in decline, because we are seeing in rugby in particular, fewer young people actively playing the game, especially youngsters. So we have to ask the question whether, the nurturing of talent at a very young age is being done well enough, and whether we are encouraging youngsters to take up rugby as well, because I think football has taken over as one of the main activities, if they do any activities at all.
Yeah, so in terms of, working alongside or even with the WRU, does the Senedd have much influence, in terms of WRU decision making? Can you push a certain way as such then? Is that something you could do?
In terms of the governance of the Welsh Rugby Union, the Senedd has a huge role to play, as we saw recently with the accusations of misogyny and bullying and harassment and, sexism as well in the sport, and particularly in the way that, the Welsh Rugby Union failed to tackle those issues. The Senedd stepped in, rightly so, and called them out for it, which led to wholesale changes at the top and people losing their jobs, including the former chief executive. So in that sense, the Senedd has a massive role to play. But whether, it has a role in terms of the way that the Welsh Rugby Union deals with the rugby side of things, that would be micromanagement in my view. But it has a role to play as well in terms of the funding it provides to grassroots sport. Now, it would be very difficult for the Welsh Government to support rugby on its own, because other sports would say, well, hold on, what about football? What about hockey? What about netball? What about swimming? And so on. So it has to be an investment in sport in general. Hopefully then that will trickle down to support rugby and all the sports, because we need young people to participate far more in sports than they are currently doing.
So if we're talking supporting all sports, so if we compare, let me say rugby to football, you've used the two major ones. Like we see a lot of, initiatives you're working on together, especially with grassroots. I think it weren't too long ago. There was an investment of around 4 million into the grassroots on the football side of it. So what sort of similar things do we see on the rugby side if we're looking that it's going to be palliative across all sports?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have those figures to be honest with you, but it would be good for somebody to do the research and compare what kind of investment is put into rugby compared to football. But it comes back as well to the success of the national team, right? The football is doing well. So, obviously young boys, young girls want to emulate their football stars. They look up to these, people, both the women and the men, as sporting heroes. Now, unfortunately, in recent years, Welsh Rugby hasn't had that success. And it's got to be asked as well, the question, what has the Welsh Rugby Union done to invest in that grassroots rugby? Now, I am still, involved in discussions I have with many friends who are very much involved in grassroots rugby, the local rugby clubs, right? They say, not enough money's pumped in. The academies are suffering. We haven't got the involvement in schools that we used to years ago. Schools rugby used to be a big thing when I was in school, but it's not so much now. So these questions have got to be asked. What's gone wrong in those lower levels? Because if we don't get that, pipeline of talent coming through, then the national team is never going to do well.
So if I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate by you, say in just over a year's time, Plaid become the majority party at the Senate, what realistically could be done? I mean, we see in countries like Ireland where there's things like tax benefits, is anything along those sort of lines, even possible under the current, state of the Senate?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we would have to look at ways of funding sport better than we are doing currently, because sport has many different benefits. It's great to have a successful football, rugby, and other sporting teams that do well on a global, European, UK level, right? It brings huge benefit to Wales. It brings tourism into places like Cardiff and other, places where sport is played. But it's got health benefits as well. And, what my party wants to do is to invest more in preventative initiatives, which avoids people becoming ill later on in life. And that means, being actively involved in sport all through your life. It doesn't end when you stop playing rugby or football. You can carry on doing other kinds of activities, which makes you a healthier person. So in that kind of wider context, Plaid Cymru, my party, would like to invest more in preventative measures, which includes sport, but we would definitely look at supporting all sport to invest in the grassroots. That's where it all starts, in getting more youngsters involved in sport. And I don't think we are doing well enough at the moment.
No, I don't think anyone could disagree with that statement. Phil Steele actually came out on socials. I know he's the president of Taftswell RFC, and saying that they should put hub officers, a dedicated hub officer, in primary schools. Now, obviously, that would generally be a WIU funded, thing to look at. But would that be something that a Plaid government would work together with? Would that be something your party would be interested in doing at those early formative years?
Yeah, well, listen, we need to look at sport across the board, but let's just concentrate on rugby for a minute, right? Because we are still suffering from that thrashing on Saturday, and the repercussions are quite obvious. The morale in Wales, the despondency is quite obvious on a Monday for everybody to see. But we need better links between the Welsh Rugby Union and schools, and that starts in primary schools. I started playing rugby in primary school. Then, I was playing youth rugby. I was playing for the school seniors as well. Sometimes I was playing 2 games on a Saturday. Didn't think anything of that. And that was the normal route into rugby. And then once you finish in youth rugby, you move on to play for your senior team. And if you're a good enough player, then, the bigger teams pick you up and bring you in. So, the Welsh Rugby Union have to have a real nuts and bolts look at what is going wrong at the moment, because clearly the model we have isn't working. We haven't got enough kids playing rugby. We haven't got a successful national team at the moment. There are questions about whether we can afford 4 regions. Are the academies successful? We've seen the under-20s play a few brilliant games, as they did when they beat England on Friday night. But then, they lose against teams they should be beating as well. So, there are green shoots there, but it's not the kind of, the answer to think, well, the under-20s is in a good place, so, we'll have a thriving future. It's not as clear as that.
No. So you touched on it a bit there, that there's obviously a lot of questions, especially surrounding finances. And, everyone's, been going through a tough time over the last 4 or 5 years, especially with COVID. So in your opinion, could the Senedd have done more to support Welsh Rugby during COVID? Should they have done more?
Well, as I said earlier on, it's difficult for the Welsh Government to just support rugby. Because all the other sports will say, hold on, what about us? Right? So my point is that we should invest more in sport in general, and that includes rugby. And I think that there is a role for Welsh Government to sit down with the Welsh Rugby Union and with all the sporting bodies in Wales and work out a roadmap as to how we can improve. Right? So put the other sports to one side. I think it is incumbent on Welsh Government to speak to the Welsh Rugby Union and have that conversation about, okay, listen, we're in a dark hole at the moment. How do we get out of it? How can we work together and with other, sporting bodies, local authorities, local education authorities in particular, and the clubs as well at all different levels, how do we pull together to make rugby more successful in Wales? Now, that's the conversation we need to have. It shouldn't be a top-down chief executive saying, hey, listen, I've got a plan. This is how it's going to work. We've got to make it inclusive so that everybody has a contribution to make.
Yeah. So I think the general fan, at least if the ones that I speak with, they feel quite aggrieved when you talk about the Welsh Government when it comes to Welsh Rugby and COVID, because obviously we saw sites like the Principality, like Parc y Sgars, be turned into field hospitals, and it appears though there's not much real terms in support for rugby. So the people. The way one person put it is, we offered everything out. We were your neighbour. We offered everything we could, and now we are struggling. There's no knock on the door.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, because the Scarlets, Parc y Scarlets was set aside for a field hospital, and other stadiums as well. So I think that's a really interesting point, and it goes back to my suggestion. I think Welsh Government should sit down with the Welsh Rugby Union and see how they can work together. And I don't think that has happened. So it needs either Welsh Rugby Union to reach out or the Welsh Government to reach out, but that conversation needs to be had, because there are spin-offs to Wales economically, health-wise, as I mentioned earlier on, community engagement through education. To have a successful Welsh rugby set up in Wales, everybody would benefit. Tourism, everything else has a spin-off. So Welsh Government has a role to play. But how that maps out depends a lot on the conversation that is had. It could be helping with marketing. It could be, helping in other ways. But we've got to have that strategic discussion. And I would urge Welsh Government to do that as soon as possible.
So another issue we face, and if we look at the under-20s team from this past Friday night, a brilliant victory, amazing, beating a side that haven't lost in 2 years. There was a large number of that under-20 side who are not playing their rugby within Wales, and when you look at where rugby players go between the ages of 16 to 18, a lot of them do tend to go to England, not for better education and better rugby opportunities, really. I mean, if you look at the facilities on offer at somewhere like Hartpury, they're absolutely phenomenal. When you come down and you look at the comparatives down here, they're not that great. So in terms of facility, because facilities affect all sports, it's not just me rugby only will affect everyone across the park. What sort of things would you be looking at to improving on that front?
Well, I mean, Welsh Government has a role to play in investing in facilities, and you're absolutely right. We need to improve facilities. Now, it breaks my heart that, we hear of the most talented youngsters going to Hartpury, going to Millfield, going to Loughborough, and these centres of excellence in England. They go at a very early age, sometimes as young as 16. And then what happens, they get drawn into the under-20s squads, the development squads of the English Rugby Union, and then they end up playing for England, as we saw on Friday night with 2 players from Wales, both really good players, playing for England. Now, what we should be doing, and again, Welsh Government has a role to play in this, and I'd love to, say that Plaid Cymru would do this if we to win the next election. We should be developing centres of sporting excellence, but let's stick to rugby excellence in Wales. So we identify young talent at the age of 15, 16, and, send them to colleges to have the academic support they need, obviously, but also to develop their rugby skills as well. I mean, Cardiff Met could do that. Bangor University could do that to cover North Wales. Aberystwyth could cover mid Wales. So we need to invest in this, and we need a strategic approach to it. But another element as well is that so many of our talented rugby players are playing their rugby in England at the moment, and we've got that 25 cap rule, which rules many of them out of playing for Wales. And why are we leaving that talent leave Wales? Why are we allowing that to happen? So again, we've got to ask the Welsh Rugby Union, are you giving enough money to the regions for us to keep that talent in Wales, to keep players in, for example, the Scarlet? They play with each other week in, week out, and that is how they develop as players in Wales. It makes the teams in Wales more successful. It brings in bigger crowds. It means more money coming into the game. It's a no-brainer for me. But, Welsh Rugby Union, rather than, buying up hotels in Cardiff, should be investing that money in rugby.
Yeah, 100% there. Now, this is something that probably affects us more than the other 3 regions, unless you want to include North Wales. Transport infrastructure. Now, especially down west, we cover a very, very large area of ground. So, and we all know the local transport isn't exactly up to scratch, shall we say. So what would you be looking at doing to improving, getting people to games, making it more affordable for people to get the games? Because let's be honest, without people coming to the grounds, there's not a great deal elsewhere you can look to increase your revenues right now.
Yeah. Look, we know that the UK government owes Wales £4 billion because of the HS2 funding, right? That was a project designated as an England and Wales project, but not 1 inch of that track goes anywhere near Wales. So as a result, we have lost out on £4 billion worth of funding. Now, that money potentially could be spent on anything, right? Health, education, sport, but it could certainly be spent on infrastructure, right? We need better rail connections in West Wales in particular. We could develop that Swansea Metro, which would link, Swansea to Cardiff, and then Swansea to Llanelli, a railway line to Aberystwyth, railway line to Ammanford, linking up the Amman Valley, linking up the valleys of South Wales to a main metro area. It would make travelling, so much less bother than taking cars. It's more environmentally friendly, and it should be made cheaper as well, because public transport is a good thing. Now, for those of us going from West Wales to the rugby, if we go on a train, that's brilliant getting there, but you try getting back on a train, it's like, herding cats, and we're all stuck there like sardines in a train. It looks like a film from Bollywood, where you've got hundreds of people hanging out from the windows and so on. It's just third world transport, really, getting back from Cardiff at the end of a game. It shouldn't be like that. So that money is there. That is owed to Wales. And Plaid Cymru has been fighting very hard to get that money, and urging Welsh Government to make the case, to Sir Keir Starmer and his government to release that money to Wales. But they are not making the case. So once again, Wales is losing out big time.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, unless we get someone other than, one of the big two in England, that money's never going to come to Wales. So if we work on the contingency that money doesn't come here, how would you look to improve things with what's currently available? I mean, what would be, first on the board?
Well, improving rail infrastructure and public transport has to be a priority, and it will be in our manifesto, because, we've seen cutbacks to bus provision, for example, in West Wales. And I went to a public meeting a couple of months ago in Llandersil, where the Booker bus scheme was dropped, right, without any, forewarning. And people were crying in that public meeting because they couldn't, go to work. They couldn't go to hospital appointments. They couldn't go to their local surgery. They couldn't go shopping. They couldn't meet their friends. And, it's horrendous when people who haven't got cars, who rely on public transport, can't go out of the house. So that is completely unacceptable. So we've got to come up with an integrated transport system in Wales, which looks at rural areas, but also meets the needs of urban areas, the valleys in particular, to join up with, other metro areas to have that interconnection. But at the moment, we are so far away that we've got to make that investment.
So we talked about quite a few things by year, and pathways is obviously a major one. So once these boys hit 18, they start going into senior rugby, especially the ones who are in the senior academy. The standard of rugby in Super Rugby Cymru, whilst good, is not as good as it could be. So I know it's far-fetched at the moment, but I've toyed with the idea of trying to professionalize that league in terms of, just a pay cap per player in the low, just something more than your average Joe would take home, just to boost the numbers and have more boys playing full time to give the actual academy boys some real competition to prove out. So what could Plaid Cymru offer for the top end of the community game to improve the standards in senior men's rugby?
What we are seeing, as I mentioned earlier on, those 16-year-olds are being enticed because they get paid to go to the Hartburys of this world, right? So they get paid some money for studying in Hartbury, and they get well looked after. Now, why can't we do that in Wales? Why can't we build these sport academies, rugby centres of excellence, pay the 16-year-olds to come along, to be picked and to be developed in those centres of excellence, also providing them with first-class education as well. If England are doing it, right, why can't Wales do it? Now, let's not forget as well, Italy were in the doldrums, Australia were in the doldrums in the context of rugby a few years ago. They went back and had a hard look at themselves. What are we doing wrong? And what do we need to improve? And they came up with a plan. And you can see those two countries now are really investing in that young age group, and we can see the talent coming through. Italy are a brilliant team. They beat us, and they beat us the year before. They nearly beat Ireland on Saturday. So you can see that they've invested, and it's paying dividends. Now, it's not rocket science that you need to invest in that a young age group and make it competitive, and grow the rugby from there up. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's got to be done.
So a lot of things to work on, a lot of things to improve, and Plaid seem like a party that's willing to do that, especially in terms of transport facilities and really engaging with the younger players, those special players. I mean, we get boys, it's very, very rare, but I know there's like 14, 15-year-olds that get picked up over in France, for instance. It's those boys that could become special talents as well that we need to look out for. So we leave that to one side. We'll start talking about things that will be coming very, very shortly in the future. So, like I said, Six Nations is over. We can put that to a side. So real rugby is back now, as I like to say. So we're back into the URC. So Stormers are coming to a Park of Scarlets this Saturday. It's a late afternoon kickoff. It's 5:15, I believe. What are you thinking of the chances? It's been a good season, and especially compared to last year. Are we expecting a win on the weekend?
Well, listen, first of all, I can't be there on Saturday. I'm absolutely gutted because I know. It's Plaid Cymru conference up in Llandudno. I couldn't be further away, right? But I'll be keeping a very close eye on my phone to get the scores coming through. The Scarlets have been really unlucky this year. There's been a huge improvement, right? Watching the Scarlets play this year is far more pleasurable than last year, right? I know last year was a low bar, but really it's a pleasure going down to watch the kind of open rugby we are trying to play. We are probably 3 or 4 key players from being a very, very good competitive team. But we've lost games in the last minute by 1-2 points. Now, when we look back at those games, if only we could have just held on, we'd be up there, maybe in the top 4 by now. So that's a massive improvement on last year. But the Stormers game on Saturday is going to be a measure of where we are. I'm a little bit afraid, I don't know how many of the Welsh players will be available, whether they'll be rested or not. If they are playing, how many of them will be bruised, not only physically, but psychologically as well. Because, I'd imagine that it's taken its toll on them, being in the heaviest defeat ever against England, 2 wooden spoons on the trot, 17 games, having lost. So on the bounce, that's difficult to, pick yourself up from. So it all depends how they, if they do play on Saturday, how they manage that. But, I'm always confident with the Scarlets playing at home. We play a brand of rugby, which is great to see. But again, success breeds success. If the Scarlets improve next year again, you will see more people coming down to the ground and support them every week. But, the crowds have been a little bit on the low side, especially last year. But I get a feeling this year the environment around the ground is better, and people are excited to go down there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this game especially, and with the season ticket launches, come out in this past week, and it is incredible value. Especially when you compare them to other sports and other rugby clubs, especially over the border. It's absolutely fantastic, especially for first timers with our new saucepan ticket they come out with. In terms of the Stormers, they've only won 6 times outside of South Africa. In this 4th season of the URC. And, the last time they came to the park, it was 26-21, and that was on the way to the title-winning season. So they haven't had a great season. So I'm quietly optimistic. I do expect, a few Welsh boys to come back. The ones that haven't played a lot of minutes. Some of them haven't played any minutes at all. So I am very optimistic for this coming Saturday. So to round off, I am going to get you to make a score prediction for Saturday. So what's it going to be?
I think the boys will want to prove themselves. Welsh Rugby will want to prove itself as well. So my prediction for Saturday will be 25-19 to the Scarlets.
Decent. It's not bad. We can
Yeah.
take are we getting the bonus point trying here? Is it going to be a few missed kicks?
I think maybe we'll be hunting for a bonus point right at the end, right? Whether we get it or not, I don't know, but I'll take a win, right? I'll take a win. But, on a wider point as well, we've talked a lot about rugby. When the regions do well, then the Welsh Rugby team do well. So it comes down to whether Welsh Rugby Union want to invest in the regions. They haven't done so sufficiently, and as a result, the teams have suffered. But what I would ideally want, this is outside politics, I would love us to have an Anglo-Welsh league, right? Whether that includes the Scottish and the Irish teams as well, making it an UK or a UK and Ireland league. I don't know, but I'd love us to play the English teams on a regular basis. That would pitch us, against the best in England, and we would then know where we stood in terms of the standard we're at, and it would improve the players as well.
Yeah, I'm all for a return of the old Anglo-Welsh Cup. Just something extra in the season would help fans come along as well. 11 games over the course of 12 months isn't great for fans for any sort of continuity. But like you said, investment is key, and that is something we're going to push forward and try and hopefully see over the coming months and years. So thank you very much for joining me, Kevin. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. I hope anyone who's listened to this now, if you have listened, like, share, subscribe, the usual rhetoric. I hope you've enjoyed as well, and we look forward to bringing you more content like this. So thank you again, Kevin.
Thanks for the invitation, because sport means so much to Wales, and we're a proud nation, and sport puts us on the sporting map of the world. So it's so important that we do well.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Hey, croeso. Ta-ra.
That was Saucepans and Sidesteps. Please rate, review and share on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.